Hi guys, it's Claire here. I wanted to make this video because this is a question I hear from students a lot. Why do I keep making basic grammar mistakes? And what I hope I can do with this video is, all of these areas which I find my students complain a lot about and get really frustrated about, where they think they're making basic errors. I want to explain why you shouldn't get frustrated and why those errors actually aren't that basic at all, and that it doesn't mean that you're not making progress in English. Yeah. So what we're going to talk about in this video is we're going to explain why these errors happen, how we need to change our perspective about it, okay? And what you can do to help improve and hopefully eradicate them. And most importantly, I think how we can be a bit kinder to ourselves as well. So let's go. So the first question that I have for you guys is, what do you consider to be a basic grammar mistake? Yeah, because I'm guessing you probably think it's things like this. For example, the third person S when we use the present simple, subject pronouns like I, you, he, she, it, forming comparatives or superlatives, using the past simple, forming questions, or the difference between will and going to. So this is all quite standard beginner English stuff, right? Which you probably think is quite basic grammar. So if this is basic grammar, guys, here's the question. Why are these the most common errors that I hear my students produce? And I'm including like my C2 level proficiency students in this, yeah? Not just my beginners. Why is it every level of student still makes errors with these basic grammar problems? One of the reasons for that, guys, is that this grammar is just one of the hardest to assimilate. What that means is that it takes longer for you to be able to process these structures and to produce them correctly. So they're also some of the first structures that are taught when you learn English. Like I said before, if you get a beginner course book in English, this is more or less going to be what you study in the book. And this is where the confusion begins about making basic grammar errors. So the way that English textbooks are constructed, not all of them, but a lot of them, it doesn't really reflect how we assimilate language, yeah? So one of the reasons that constructing grammar structures is focused on so much in a lot of course books and in a lot of English courses is that this is something which is really easy to test. It's very easy to test if you know how to construct the present perfect, or if you know how to construct sentences with will, or if you know how to construct the present simple. Yeah, that's an easy thing to make an exam about. And the theory behind the third person is quite easy. Yeah, it's not super complicated. If it's he, she, or it, we have to add an S to the verb. But processing and producing that piece of language is much harder than the theory. So because this language is taught at a beginner level, we consider this to be easy or basic grammar, right? We should know this, we should be able to do this. And the result of that is that it makes a lot of my students feel like they're terrible at English or that they're not progressing because they're making these basic errors and they can't master the basics of English. And this is really unfair on yourselves, yeah? In fact, the third person S, this is one of the last things that learners from all languages and all age groups actually find hardest to assimilate. It takes a really long time to process it. But while a student might make a mistake like saying he like chocolate instead of saying he likes chocolate, I really regularly see students correctly produce a sentence like this. Not only is chocolate delicious, it can make you feel happy. Now this structure here, guys, this is what's called an inversion for emphasis. And this is considered advanced grammar, okay? It's something that you'll learn on a B2 or a C1 level course. So why is it that my students are finding it easier to produce this advanced grammar instead of the basics? Well, there's some good reasons for that, guys, and there's quite a lot of reasons why it's going to take you longer to assimilate certain language in English. The most significant one of those reasons is your L1, your first language, yeah? So that means your mother tongue or the language you grew up speaking the most. And the way that your L1 is constructed will of course have quite a big of an effect on how you are producing English, especially if we're working on our fluency, yeah? Because when we're speaking quickly, that's when we tend to sacrifice our accuracy. So when you're trying to be more fluent, you will sometimes, without even noticing it, bring in structures from your own language, which makes sense because we're thinking quickly, we're trying to communicate an idea, and our brains are wired for our L1 more than the English, which would be our L2, or maybe L3 or 4 if you're learning lots of languages. Everyone also learns differently. We process information differently. And that means that there's going to be some things that you'll find really easy to process, and there's others that will be difficult for you. And that's okay, yeah? It's just the way that you process information and how you learn. Some things in English will make lots of sense. Others are going to seem really weird, and those weird ones will take more time for you to understand and use correctly. And this, of course, affects you when you're learning another language. Yep, whichever way you learn, generally, you're going to find that that's affecting you in a second language too. Another thing which is really important to consider when we're thinking about these basic structures or advanced grammar or whatever you want to call it, is if that grammar that you are finding difficult to produce is even particularly useful, yeah? Because maybe you're really struggling with something and it's not even that important. Let me give you a great example of that. Take question tags, okay? So question tags are the things that look like this. It's Monday today, isn't it? So we are using question tags basically to confirm, check, or emphasize information. And to form them, it's quite complicated. So we have to make the question tag negative if the sentence is positive, and vice versa. So in this one that we've got here, it's Monday today is a positive statement. So that means the question tag I'm producing has to be negative. And then apart from that, we have to identify what auxiliary verb is relevant to the structure we're using and put that into our question tag. So for example, here, I'm speaking in the present simple structure, so that means that I need to use the verb to be. And to give you another example, guys, if I say, you lived in Spain, didn't you? This here is in the past simple, so I'm using did because that's my auxiliary. And of course, making it negative because this one is positive. Oh my goodness. So this structure is actually normally taught at a pre-intermediate level, right? Which, if you are familiar with the Common European Framework of how we grade language, that means an A2 level, more or less. And this is considered basic grammar, right? This is meant to be something that we should be able to produce quite easily. But they're really complex. Look at all the things that you have to do simultaneously. Yeah, so this is really hard to do if you are speaking and trying to speak fluently, and you suddenly have to be like, oh, what's the auxiliary which I need to use with this sentence? I made a positive sentence, this has to be a negative one. It's a really difficult thing to produce. And not only that, guys, there's that inversion again that I showed you the example of before. L1 speakers of English very often don't even use question tags. We use different words. So in Scotland, for example, we very often say "a" at the end of a sentence, right? Like, it's a nice day, "a," to confirm and to check. In London, they say in it, and very often they use it in a way that doesn't make grammatical sense. And I'm using my air quotes here again because who decides what language is, right? So if we're working within a very set rule of what English is, then grammatically, very often it's used incorrectly, but lots of people use it that way. So I would say that's, that's fine. That's just real language. So for example, she's really nice, in it. And a lot of my students just say no at the end of a sentence. And that's great. Why not? You're using the exact same structure and the same functions of that, yeah? Like you would if you use that complicated auxiliary, negative, positive thing that we have to do with question tags. You're expressing the exact same function, okay? You're saying no at the end to confirm or check something, that doesn't affect your communication at all. People completely understand what you're talking about. And also, it's so much easier than trying to put together this very difficult construction that we have to do, okay? So really consider when you are finding some basic grammar difficult, really consider if it's even worth the effort, if it's something important that you need to work on. I'd also say with question tags, for example, question tags are something that we use in informal spoken English, yeah? So it depends what you're using your English for, but you're not going to produce it in an exam writing, for example. It's probably not going to come up that naturally in a speaking exam. And it's not something you would need to use in a presentation or a job interview. So, like, why waste your energy and why get stressed trying to learn how to produce this correctly? There's so much other language that would be more beneficial to dedicate your time to. Now, there is a bad side to this, of course, and this is the word exams. So if you are taking an exam in English, these basic errors can still present quite an issue for you. I said before that the reason that so many books are constructed around grammar in English is because it's a very easy thing to test, yeah? And in testing, these basic errors are still seen as you making a low-level mistake. Yeah. So if you were taking an advanced exam and making that mistake with the third person we saw earlier on, that's considered a basic error. This is also true of international exams, as well as ones that you might be taking in your school or in your university. And unfortunately, until perspectives change a bit, that's something that we're going to have to work out how to deal with. But knowing that these are not basic errors and that you are not terrible at English, having that knowledge can really help you improve and get better marks as well. So what I would suggest is making a list of these basics that you usually make a mistake with, yeah? And from that, you make a list that you use to check, for example, your writing. After you finish doing a writing, you review that list and look for those common errors in your text. And when you're speaking, be aware of where you have a tendency to make those errors, whether it's the third person, whether it's your comparatives, and spend time really trying to develop your accuracy on those points, yeah? Also, please remember that making mistakes is genuinely the very best way to learn. Like, that is science, guys. It's scientifically proven that we learn by making mistakes. So making a mistake when you're speaking a language isn't a bad thing. Yeah, it's your first step to improving and eradicating that, and it's good news. And above all, please be kind to yourself. Yeah, don't get angry because you've made what you consider to be a basic error. There are no basic errors. There's just things that we process faster or more slowly. You're going to get there eventually. Learning a language is a journey. It takes time, and you're going to have a lot of steps on that road to reaching your language goals. And that's great, yeah? And you're already doing an incredible thing by just starting on that journey and taking the big leap in learning another language. It's not an easy thing to do. So, well done. You're an amazing human for starting to do this. Keep going. You'll see how little by little you're going to manage to get rid of those mistakes which are causing you problems. You're going to manage to assimilate and process all of those tricky things, and you're going to reach the goals that you want in English. Until next time, everyone, see you soon.